Hello, I'm Odin. And I know that just last week I talked about how the power converters video was going to be a bonus video, an additional video, and not my next weekly build. But that was before I got a chance to ask Shawn Cash to drop by.
And today, I'm going to try and help Odin make 2 Tosche Station power converters. On today's Try to Odin Make Something.
So what I want to do is I want to make a pair of them because the dialogue in the movie is plural, power converters, right? My plan is to use some pre-existing stuff I have. I want to kit bash and scratch build a lot like I did with the Guardians of the Galaxy gun and just make up my own thing as inspired by Star Wars. Not necessarily something you saw in Star Wars because you never saw these in Star Wars. So I'm gonna get my box of stuff and start gluing things together. We all have giant boxes of extra parts, right? You know, the spare parts bin. You know, a box full of this could be good for something. I have an idea of what I want the prop to look like. I start picking out pieces that look like they could work. I also pick things that would be easier to glue, for the most part. Then I just start trying the pieces out, seeing how they look and how they might arrange. Almost. They are a different thread, but they are close. And I've always liked the little parts on a pop-up sprinkler. The main body is just too recognizable for me. Actually fits really well. That's not bad. That fits that way. That would give me a thick way to glue it. That's not bad either. Okay, that needs to happen. I want to put a light in this. One of the things I want to do is I want to take some tea lights. I want to put a couple of little tea lights on these so you can see that they're on, right? Because I like the little pulsing, flickering you get from a tea light. So I want to incorporate a couple of those into these. Plus I got enough space. I can put batteries in these without a problem, right? That's pretty lucky. Those two go together really well. Okay, that needs to happen. But in order for that to happen, I'm gonna need to take another one of these. These are plastic napkin rings from the dollar store. I'm gonna need to sand that so it matches this, or I gotta drill this out, but I think sanding is actually a better plan. That's close enough. I think I can fake the rest with glue. And what do I put on the inside of this thing? Oh, wait a minute. Well, that's kind of neat looking too. The threaded black piece is a random IKEA part. You can buy extra bits and pieces from IKEA very cheaply from the service counter. And after sanding all the edges to fit inside the napkin ring, the big side vent is good to go. And honestly, this is what I do for the design portion. Find parts that look good, or good enough, and cut some sheets of plastic to make sure everything fits and looks nice. You know, basically, kit bashing, where you mix model pieces together to make a new spaceship. But I'm just mixing up bits and pieces of furniture and hardware store parts instead of model kits. I might be getting somewhere with that. The small black tubes are dollar store hair curlers set around wooden rings. And that hat piece is a part that I had cast for my test rack containment unit build a couple of years ago. I just needed a ring of leftover styrene to make them all look connected. What I want to do is take the curlers apart and make them light up. Okay, so I think I got enough of these. I'm thinking I'm getting a design and a look with this that I want to go with. What's funny is it's getting to be more complicated than I was intending on it to be. Not entirely. I mean, it's a bunch of crap thrown together. That was all I ever intended on it to be. But I can see it doing so much more already. These translucent tubes that I'm cleaning off, they were the core from the plaster of Paris wrap that was used for my head cast. And the cages from the rollers fit over them. So I can get 3 from each of these. That's good. Well, I only want 6, so I want to see the rings in the middle. To get the cages to fit correctly onto the milky plastic tube, I need to cut the ends off the curler cores, then snip a side open, which lets them fit over the tube. But both the tube and the curlers are that soft, annoying plastic that will not superglue or take any paint really well. But I can hold them in place with a hole in the gray box and foam plugs glued into the white styrene ring. So that's going to happen. I like the core of this. I like this is a very old school Star Wars type of pattern. This it's also very Star Trek, but there's a number of things that do this in the Star Wars universe. So this I like as the center. And I kept thinking about trying to make it be asymmetrical, and this one's turning out to be very symmetrical. But it looks good to me. I like it. So that's what's going to happen. That's not bad. The end of the Tesseract thing's not bad. All they need to do is find pieces to cover or fill the holes in the sides where the conduit attaches. I mean, it would look bad if the details on my intergalactic power box looked a little too much like a Terran power box, right? After a while, my attention turned back to finishing the white box. I wanted to make sure it didn't look too much like a ceiling power box, like for a ceiling fan. Okay. I think I have enough going on with the gray one. I think I have enough going on with the white one here that I've got something. What I'm going to need to do is figure out exactly where the drill holes are going to have to go, and I'm probably going to use the computer to help me with that, with getting things set up exactly right. So I'm going to sit down and do that really quick, and I'm going to drill some holes, and then I can actually start kind of putting these things together. All right. All right. I drilled a hole in the side of the white box so the threads from the IKEA part could fit. And then I had sanded the chrome off the end of the napkin ring so the hairdryer grill can be super glued in place. I made a cover from 4mm what the foam and thin styrene. This covers the hollow space for the mounting of the ceiling box and helps make it look just round. And I made a template for LED placement. That way I can mark my targets. I glue the cover in place. By the way, this white box is made from fiberglass. I can tell by the way it smells when I'm drilling it. So glue and paint will stick without a problem. And when I drill the holes, I'm doing it by hand. So the perfect template now has a human error element introduced. For a frame around the LEDs, I have some more random IKEA pieces. These are just cut down and glued in place. The other bits are super glued on top. And the sprinkler piece, there's a hole drilled for wiring the LED. Then I can glue on a few other little round bits, simple little greebles to break up the flat spaces. Wanted to put a thing here, just like a strip. A few strips of styrene later, and I start looking at some rivets that I have from forever ago. These are just those basic hammer and smash them style rivet, but they look great when they're glued in place too. So then this part is supposed to go up here. Just kind of glue in. I can't glue it in until I get it painted because I want to keep the clear part clear, so I think I can get this to glow. To cover up the other side, I cut a cardboard tube to fit over the indentation. I want to cover the tube with 2mm what the foam. Both parts are covered with contact cement, and after the cement dries, I can stick the foam to the tube and then cut away the excess foam. I superglue the tube to the box and superglue another IKEA part over the tube. Now there's a couple of numbers on the part, mold identification numbers, so I want to drill out those number 4s and glue in more rivets to hide those pesky earth numbers. That's all I plan to do for this one. It just needs paints and lights. I made a drill template for the gray box. I made a large hole for the center PVC. It needs a little tape to be the right size for the wooden rings to fit. And they were all glued together over the center pipe. Then I made 5 more of those cage light things. I really wish glue I had would work on this plastic. Gonna need a little adjustment, a little sanding, because I don't like the fact that they're not all straight up and down, but that's kind of what I wanted. Then the idea was this piece goes on top, and this can easily glue to the foam plugs on top of all of these, which will help hold them in place. And then this guy, I was just gonna glue that on there. Each of the conduit connection ports were covered with different items. Sprinkler parts, some are plastic, one is made from brass, and pieces from a toy spyglass. I had cut the mounting tabs off the box, but then I realized that they could look like part of a hinge for like maybe a missing cover. So I glued them back on, but in a different orientation. And to break up the flat areas on this one, I heated a wire cover strip made for LED lights and bent them over a 1-2-3 block. And then I cut the ends to size, and they were glued on with PVC glue. And I'm thinking I'm calling it quits here, because I like what I'm seeing. As far as basic shapes go, that's what I wanted to do. That isn't exactly how I pictured it, when I originally thought about it, but I wanted a round thing, I wanted to stick stuff on it, I wanted to stick a lot of vertical type things on top of the round thing. So I'm pretty close to what my original idea was, but I knew that I was going to make it up as I went along. Pretty happy with these. I think this is gonna look great when it lights up. This will probably look really good glowing too. What I need to do is get them painted. So I've got the base coat done. And why is it under a box? Well, because today, Shawn's here with me. You already saw him earlier, but he's actually here with me to give me a hand and help me finish this thing. And I was really hoping that you'd show me your toothpaste technique.
And I brought some.
Yo, good.
And I brought my dirty plate to help weather it.
That was funny. Unfortunately, I said that before I turned the cameras on. I was like, oh, you brought the plate!
I use that same plate all the time, and it's just got so much built-up grime. It works perfect.
Yes, it is. It's like, oh, I know that. Well, let's see. First, we'll do this.
Now, I haven't seen it yet.
Right. So that's...
Nice.
I wanted to do a couple of them because I wanted to pick up some power converters from Tosche Station. Right?
Yeah.
It was plural, so it's okay. Make a couple of them. I don't know. Maybe they do different things. Like maybe one transfers from Tatooine Prime 96 volt whatever to Coruscant 9 volt whatever. But anyway,
And see, that's my problem is every time I'm building something, I put way too much effort into the story behind it, and I think I have some sort of a mental issue with it because I like to know what it is that it does, and it helps me tell the story of the prop. Because I brought mine too, and my whole process on mine was I wanted it to convert heating of water into the actual energy to create the power. And so I have it so that it has like this little thing inside that has like the power, and it has like the... So I don't know. I put way too much thought into it, but I'm glad to see that you did the same thing. I like it.
Okay, good. When we first talked about it, round like this was my very first thought. And as I'm building this one specifically, I suddenly realized, oh, these are the charges that Han said in the indoor bunker.
Yep.
I then explained to Shawn what my plans were for the parts, telling him everything I had told you earlier in this video. I also pulled off some of the parts that needed to be set aside and not get spray painted, like the brass and the chrome.
All right, so the base on this is going to be black.
Okay.
So...
Yeah, I didn't know if you wanted to spray the silver, or I guess it's going to end up being black because we're black already. Okay.
And then, so I like to use bits of sponge and just brushes to do the toothpaste technique. And the reason I like the toothpaste is it's hard to control. And if something is really chipping, obviously you know that it's going to just do what nature wants it to do. The paint's going to chip off just where it's worn and where everything goes on.
Okay.
And what I like to do is just kind of glob it on and try not to be too particular with it, because then when we give it the next round of paint, this is going to still be wet underneath, and when you wipe it off, the paint will really chip. I mean, you're going to get a real chipping because that hard coat of the spray paint on top with that then wiping off the toothpaste gives a real chip. So it's not a painted on chip, it's really the object getting real chips. So I did this all using that same technique, which I'm still in the process of doing. It doesn't have the visor or the sides, but
Sure.
This is all just toothpaste, and you can see how random it winds up getting. And then when I wipe it off, you get all of that chipping down to the first coat, which is black in your case and silver in mine. And that's what I like about this is there's a real dimension to the chip. I mean, you have that hard layer, and you have that second layer, and when you feel it, you can feel the difference between the layers, and it's not just a painted on effect, and that little bit of an edge helps hold grime and stuff like that when you put that layer of weathering on there that kind of gets caught in that little groove, and it just kind of sells the realism a little bit more, and I know I obsess about it.
It's fine. It's cool.
I realize I get a little obsessive about the detail. That's my favorite part of any prop, is doing the weathering.
Sure.
I mean, I enjoy that part of it.
We applied white toothpaste to the props in various places. Mostly, I tried to get corners and edges of panels, places I think that chips would happen first.
And the hard part is, at least for me, is knowing when to stop.
I was just thinking about that. I was like, I don't really want to make this too.
It just depends on how weathered you want it to wind up.
Once we had good coverage for paint chipping, we taped off places that would remain black. Now, it probably would have been smart to do that as the first step, but I didn't think about it before we started with the toothpaste. Okay, so I can say black.
That's why when we started this challenge, one of the first questions that you and I had discussed is, you had said, well, what size is yours? And I said, I don't know, I'm thinking somewhere around shoebox size. And you said, I'm thinking something you can hold in your hand. And I went, great, it's gonna be different. Should we do some painting?
Let's do some painting. The spray paint was mostly dry, so we helped it along with some heat guns.
And then start wiping off some toothpaste.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
So what I've found works good is I do a dry first, and depending on which way you want it to chip, because it'll chip past where you have the toothpaste. So I'll chip the direction, I'll brush it off the direction I want it to chip, where I want more paint to come off. And I do it with a dry first, and then I'll come back and with a wet one or a damp one, then clean it up.
Okay, because you're smearing it.
Yeah, exactly. It's gonna smear all over the place.
I remember seeing Joe do this with a Gundam, and he did a lot of black first, and then went back and put silver inside of the black.
Yep. Yeah, with my my Mandalorian armor, I did chipping in 4 different layers. So I did much like that. I had like the black first, then a silver, and it's like I would then go through and it's like I would put the toothpaste in the same places I had black, but just in a little different spot. So it's like every time I peeled another layer off, I saw different things, and that took a long time.
I bet. The majority of the toothpaste comes off with a dry paper towel. Add just a little bit of water and the rest wipes off very easily. And it also helps to lightly scratch the paint surface, which really removes the glossy of the paint, which we kind of needed to do anyway. The next thing Shawn likes to do is press tape over the prop, pulling up more paint and making tiny little chips in new places.
So now, you want to do some, you said you've never used the oils. So
I haven't used oil. No, I haven't.
I have some black.
Okay.
I'll put on there. And the nice thing about these is they're the water-based, so you can actually dilute them with water so you can get different thicknesses and blends and consistencies to give you a bunch of different layers.
Oh,
and,
okay. Can I see one?
You, of course, can.
Water-based oils?
Yes.
Water mixable oil color.
I didn't know they existed either. I think it was Bill Duran I saw do it first. And
that would make sense.
I went from there and went to Michael's.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'll usually try and go with like a thin pass in some of the cracks first, wipe off, add another one with a different color, and just keep going. I am always impressed with Joe's painting techniques when it comes to putting down airbrush paints. And I have an airbrush, I'm not that good with it yet, and I can get a lot of variation with just using layers like this, and so I wind up defaulting to this a lot just because I don't have the time to learn the airbrush.
Yeah, I don't have the patience to
Yes.
to force the airbrush to do its job.
And depending on how long you let it sit on the prop, you're going to get different textures and depth, and you're going to get a lot of different color variations and stuff too. So
Okay. I really started to cover my converter, really getting it grimy. And much like with an acrylic wash, you wipe off what you want removed, what needs to be cleaner, what needs to be smeared, and if you take too much off, just apply more. The oil paints do have a different feel than the acrylics, but they cover better, and they don't seem to lighten up as they dry.
And the last thing that I like to do is the doing the dust. And I like, even though I don't know if this material rusts, because it's a real world thing that I can identify with, I like drips of rust and to have some rust on it. And I found these in one of the model groups that I was following, the Tamiya Weathering Master palette.
So it's not a palette of eyeshadow.
It is not. Well, maybe. Depending on what you enjoy. If you take that with a brush, you can get this on there and you can create some nice drips that you can smear
Okay.
and just get some different colors and textures in a couple spots to kind of create lines of rust that would be dripping down. And again, I don't know if whatever metal this is made of would actually rust, but it looks real world to me based on what I know in the real world.
And as I applied some rub and buff to get my part silver, Shawn started using the paint pigment powder to get a dirty dust layer on the prop. Once I started applying it to mine, it felt just like painting with wet paint, even wiping off some of it, but leaving paint dust in the cracks and corners of the prop. Now, I don't want a part to be clean when the rest was not, so all the glowing parts got a dust bath as well. As I started to hot glue the glow parts onto my converter, Shawn brought some decals that we could use to add little bits of information detail, little pieces of color. And they were given a quick weathering coat as well. They were dusted, they were grimed up, they were wiped down, and some of the sticker edges were torn and made to look chipped.
And the first time I used the stickers, I stressed a lot as to straight lines. I should go get my paper cutter, and then it's like, well, they're going to be weathered. It's okay if they're not perfectly straight. They could have peeled off a little bit.
So Shawn, I really appreciate that you wanted to come down, and I feel really lucky that you're close enough that you can kind of
I can, yeah. It's a lot of fun.
So thank you, and I really thank you for this. Thank you a lot. And if anyone wanted to see more of how you try to finish something,
Yes.
where would they find you?
Here on YouTube, try to finish something, and I make a lot of super nerdy Star Wars props, mostly. There's every now and then I'll do something else, but try to finish something. If you're a fan of Star Wars, I've got something for you.
Awesome. Thank you. Anywhere else? Any other social media?
I started a Facebook group that's all about weathering. It's weathering props, costumes, and models, just so that different people that do this kind of thing can share their techniques and we can kind of all learn from each other. And that's pretty much it.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
My plan for the lights in the green converter is to just use the flickering LEDs from cheap tea lights. The LEDs are 3 volts, so just a pair of AA batteries is going to be fine. And going with my typical habits, I pull the tiny wires that are in a Cat5 network cable and solder them to the LEDs. Even though all these wires are different colors, I solder to the solid color for each positive lead on the LED, and the mostly white wire gets attached to the negative lead. I put heat shrink tubing over one lead to prevent electrical shorts and test each light as it's ready. For the top LED, I decided to glue the plastic flame piece back over it. It softens the glow and looks better behind those translucent pieces I'm going to put on later. And the holes in the side are nearly perfect for LEDs. I can just super glue them in place. Then I solder the negative wires together and connect them to the battery pack and cover that exposed wire with heat shrink. On the positive wire, I add a push button power switch, just on and off. I super glue the switch to a chunk of What the Foam and glue that chunk of foam to the inside of the box. For now, I'm going to shove a piece of foam over the batteries to hold them in place, I might make a cover that I can screw in place later. Maybe. Cool. All right. That's crazy bright. Yeah. Okay. That's one. More Cat 5 wires for this other unit. But this time, I want to use some 5-volt strip LED lights. I can cut just 3 LEDs from the end of the strip and they'll fit inside of the glow tubes. I solder the positive and negative the same way as I did before. And to power them, I have a battery box for some old Christmas lights. The switch is on, off, flashing, and phasing. And that's what I really want. I've had this battery box for a while, and half the time when I'm making something, it's like, why would I want it to do that? This is exactly what I want it to do. Each LED strip is stuffed into the glow tube with a bit of translucent foam to act as a diffuser. It's going to help blend the light so there's not just a bright spot only where the LED is. The battery box has its own power switch, so all I need to do is attach the correct wire to the battery box wires. The battery box just barely fits inside the gray electrical box. I needed to grind off some of the plastic to help it fit. But with the batteries inside of both, I now have a pair of power converters. Most of the materials I use in this project I picked up locally. A lot of it I already had in the shop for years. I'll try and put some sort of list into the description. Okay, so this was fun because you and I made power converters and played around with it, weathered it. So one thing I'm kind of curious about, hey James, you want to make some power converters? I get lots of requests for doing more things using found objects, for making stuff up out of my own head instead of directly emulating something that I see on screen. Copying stuff is definitely my go-to and my preferred version of art and my preferred way of building stuff. But this was a lot of fun. And yeah, the little artist in me goes, oh, that could be better. That's good, but you know what? I'm really happy with these. These are just fine. And they're self-contained, which I like. And yeah, these are pretty cool. So thank you, Shawn Cash. Thank you so much for coming down, for giving me a hand with getting these painted, even though we were supposed to be having a friendly competition. Instead, it became a friendly collaboration. So thank you very much. I appreciate your company. I appreciate you showing exactly how you do your toothpaste weathering technique. And I've never played with the pigments before exactly like that for weathering. Just this last time with the gaffy stick, I tried to use some metallic pigments, powdered pigments. It didn't quite work, but it worked okay. This looks really good. I like this a lot. I'm excited about this. I'm gonna have to go pick up some of this water-based oil paint for myself, and might be doing some more heavy weathering stuff in the future. It might be Star Wars, it might not, but I know that there's gonna be lots of different ways you can make some used-looking equipment for different parts of the galaxy. But this is how Odin makes. I really think the Borg kind of killed this piece for most stuff, you know? Well, Odin, you could use white glue. Well, yeah, I could, but I just glued this together, today, so right. White glue wouldn't be dry.
Yeah, and as we discussed off camera, I am nowhere near patient enough.
Right. That's also why I keep using accelerator on super glue, which takes 10 seconds to set up.
I believe the package says instant.
Yes. I want to thank Gingham Prime, Jonathan Wiesner, Robert M. Davis, and all of my Patreon supporters. Patreon members at the $5 and above level get access to my private Discord, which includes weekly games with me, prop-related chat, and early access to live streams. My Patreon support is the #1 thing that makes this show possible. If you like the video, don't forget to subscribe. Have an idea for something for me to make? Please leave a comment below. And if you make any of these projects, you can send me a picture.